Good evening, everyone, and welcome. My name is Karen Pardue, and I am the Provost and Senior Vice President for Academic Affairs here at the University of New England. We are delighted that you could join us tonight for the George and Barbara Bush Distinguished Lecture. This is an important and much anticipated event in our fall semester. I would like to begin by asking you to please check and silence your cell phones. Also, please note that only approved photographers may use flash photography during this event. The University of New England requires masks indoors regardless of vaccination status, so I would ask that you please wear a mask throughout the duration of tonight's lecture. At this time, it is now my honor and pleasure to introduce you to the President of the University of New England, Dr. James D. Herbert.
Thanks so much, Karen. So, good evening, everyone. It's my pleasure to welcome you to the University of New England's 11th Annual George and Barbara Bush Distinguished Lecture. It's so wonderful to see so many UNE students and faculty and professional staff, as well as trustees and friends of the Bush family, friends from the George and Barbara Bush Foundation, and various neighbors from here locally in Maine, gathered once again for one of UNE's annual highlights. Looking out and seeing this crowd, it brings such a contrast for what we've all been through in the past year. It really puts it all in stark relief. Together, we at UNE have weathered the storm and made the adjustments necessary to keep one another safe during the height of the pandemic, while continuing our core mission of educating students. And now, thanks to our shared diligence and resolve, we're able to come together again for this very special evening. And I must say, it's great to be back together in person, face to face. Enough of the little Zoom screens. We offer this lecture series as a way of celebrating the remarkable lives of President George Herbert Walker Bush and First Lady Barbara Bush. Through the years, this lecture has become an annual rite of autumn here at the university for us. The amazing people it has brought to our campus have graced us with much wisdom. And I'm sure this year's speaker, Ms. Jean Becker, will do the same. But before I introduce her, there are some other guests I'd like to acknowledge. We have several current and former UNE trustees in attendance this evening. At this time, I'd like to ask all of the trustees, both former and current, to please stand and be acknowledged. Thank you all so much for your service to UNE. As many of you know, this series is made possible through the leadership gift of Peter and Rosalind Whalen. Peter and Roz, would you please rise and be recognized so that we may acknowledge you? Thank you so much, Peter and Roz. The Bush Foundation also deserves special recognition as it has once again assisted us in making this year's event possible. I'd especially like to thank the Foundation's CEO, Max Engelholzer, and Director of Events and Programming, Sarah Farrell. I know they and many of their colleagues in Texas are watching the live stream of this event right now. I'd like to welcome them, as well as our other online viewers. We're so glad you could tune in. Thank you. This evening, we're fortunate to be joined by many of the President and First Lady's loved ones, including their daughter, Doro Bush-Koch, and Mrs. Bush's brother, Scott Pierce, as well as several other family members and friends of the President and First Lady. Please join me in welcoming these special guests. Thanks so much for joining us. And I also extend my heartfelt congratulations to the entire Bush family on the arrival of the latest member of the family. Former First Daughter Barbara Bush and her husband Craig welcomed their daughter, Cora Georgia, into the world on Monday. And she was born right here in Maine. So she's the newest Mainer. Congratulations. Although President and Mrs. Bush are no longer with us, their presence continues to be felt at UNE. Our George and Barbara Bush Center, where my own office is located, reminds us daily of these two iconic Americans for whom it is named. Our George and Barbara Bush exhibit chronicles the Bush family's love affair with Maine, the presidential years, and the Bush connection to UNE. If you haven't explored these treasures of our campus yet, please, I encourage you to do so. The President and First Lady exemplified the commitment to public service that characterized America's greatest generation. Leading by example, they dedicated their lives to others. They were role models in their time, and they continue to be today. At UNE, we had the privilege of getting to know them on a personal level. They stopped by our campus from time to time in their boat. They became our friends. They involved themselves in the life of our community. They inspired us with their passion for brightening the lives of others. Today's speaker will, no doubt, deepen our understanding of our late friends. Jean Becker was President Bush's chief of staff for nearly 25 years, from 1994 until his death in 2018. As such, she played a firsthand role in the never-boring story of the Bush's post-presidential life, including being at President Bush's side when he died and then arranging his state funeral. Ms. Becker is the author of several books, including the recently released The Man I Knew, a behind-the-scenes look at the office of the former president. The book chronicles how President Bush rebuilt his life after his loss to Bill Clinton in 1992, detailing how he became best friends with the man who defeated him and developed the odd habit of jumping out of airplanes, adjusted to life in a wheelchair, and continued to make a difference in the world throughout his later years. More than that, Ms. Becker is a board member of the George and Barbara Bush Foundation, and she's been an indispensable contact to us throughout the entirety of this lecture series. She's been incredibly helpful in identifying and putting us in touch with every speaker we've hosted and getting the consensus of the President and First Lady while they were still with us. The series has been possible thanks in large part to her help, and for that, we are very grateful. At this time, it is my pleasure to introduce the 11th speaker in the George and Barbara Bush Distinguished Lecture Series at UNE. Please join me in giving a big UNE welcome to Ms. Jean Becker.
Okay, I was really nervous about tonight because I've been doing this book tour for 4 months, and most of it has been virtual, home in my pajamas. I put on lipstick and a cute little top, and we're not going to talk about the rest. So I was sort of nervous about having an audience with so many people I know and love, but the lights are so bright, you could all be naked, and I wouldn't know. So thank you. Thank you, James and Karen and everyone at the University of New England. It's such a privilege to be here. And thank you, Doro, for coming. I know you're out there somewhere. I know it's been sort of a crazy week. I see your arm, I think. It's been sort of a crazy week for the family, so thank you for coming. I apologize, I'm going to speak from notes because I find if I don't, I ramble and I get off topic. For example, what I really want to talk about is, how do you all feel about Tom Brady coming back to Foxborough on Sunday? And how many of you want to make a little bet with me if the Red Sox and the Cardinals are in the World Series? Come and see me later. The Cardinals who just won 16 in a row, I'm just saying. Tom Frechette, I know you're out there. Anyway, being President Bush's chief of staff for 25 years was one of the great privileges of my life. I spent the pandemic writing the book, and I really wrote it for fun. I wrote it for fun because of all the great stories, like 1 or 2 of which you're going to hear tonight. You're going to have to buy the book to hear the rest of them. But as I was, well, before I get to that point, let me go back. Another reason why I had to write the book is because President Bush, where did all these stories come from? Because he was the biggest idea person I ever met in my life. The 5 scariest words that ever came out of his mouth was, Jean, I have an idea. And this was usually at 7 o'clock in the morning when he's had a pot of coffee and has read 4 newspapers. And sometimes they were simple things like, do you want to go get pizza for lunch? And I'd be like, okay. And then other times he would say, I've been thinking about it. I'm going to start jumping out of airplanes. So we need to figure that out. And I think we have a picture to go with that crazy thought. My first question to him, Dora will appreciate this. Have you told your wife? And the answer was no. I'm going to tell her tonight during cocktails. So one of the stories, I have a letter that he wrote his 5 children, which was sort of his diary about that first parachute jump. And one of the things when he called all the kids to tell them he was going to jump out of the plane, he asked them to please not tell anyone because he didn't want to make it public yet. And one of my favorite responses is actually yours, Doro. Doro says, why would I tell anyone that? Then there are other times, honestly, I had no idea what his idea was, what he was thinking. And this photo would be a good example of that. Doro will remember this day. What? You know, he's wearing an aardvark hat. Do you know how hard it is to have a serious conversation with the former president of the United States where he wore it all day? And we're actually having a pretty serious conversation there. But anyway, there's just a lot of fun stories in the book. And as I was writing the book, I understood there was something much bigger at play here. As I was writing about everything I learned from him, and all the great examples he set for all of us. You know when someone dies and they say it was a life well lived? President Bush really left us a blueprint on how to live a life well lived. He really did. He lived life with passion and joy. His mantra was faith, family, and friends. He lived what he always said, any definition of a successful life must include service to others. He was amazing. And I think this next series of pictures is a pretty good example of just how amazing he was. His friendship with this man, Bill Clinton, who was here a couple years ago, in 1992, this was not an easy campaign. And no, they were not friends, and they became best friends. This is a picture of them in Indonesia after the horrible tsunami that hit that country at Christmas Day 2004. And the President of the United States, who happened to be George W. Bush, asked his dad and asked President Clinton if they would raise money in the private sector. And they said yes. And then they traveled to the region. And I went on that trip. And they left as colleagues with a common mission, and they came home best friends. If Barbara Bush were here, he would tell you that President Bush was the father that Bill Clinton never had. The Bush kids started calling him their brother from another mother. But what a great example. We have another picture. That's after Hurricane Ike that hit the coast of Texas. That's Secretary James Becker with them. And I think we have one more. I should be embarrassed to show this picture, but it's sort of funny. This is after Hurricane Harvey, which dumped 50 inches of rain on Houston. And for this fundraising, it was the 2 George Bushes were going to raise money for their hometown, their home state of Texas. And the other former presidents basically said, we're in. We're in. And I sort of feel bad because they're in the green room here. This is at Texas A&M. And we're getting ready to go out and do a big concert, a big fundraiser, and I'm photobombing their little visit in the green room. But what a great example for us that this is the way it's supposed to be. You can agree to disagree about all sorts of things, politics or religion, but at the end of the day, it's really wonderful to come back and be friends and work for a common cause. And I keep waiting for Congress to invite me to come talk to them so I can talk about this, but my invitation got lost in the mail. So I'm going to tell you one story about that President Bush and President Clinton literally raised hundreds of millions of dollars for disaster relief. But my favorite disaster story Hardly anyone knows this, but right after Hurricane Katrina, like a week or 10 days later, another hurricane ravaged Louisiana, the rest of Louisiana, and the east coast of Texas. It was called Hurricane Rita, and they were getting no attention, none. All the energy and media attention was in New Orleans. And these poor people couldn't get any, they could barely get the Red Cross to come to town. So a man named Richard Suschlag, I love saying that name, cold called the office. He was from a little town called Cameron, Louisiana, which had almost been flattened. And he said, we need help. And what he wanted was for President Bush to help raise money so they could rebuild an emergency room. The hospital was gone. And he said, we need medical care, and if we can just get the emergency room rebuilt and up and running, I think people will start coming back home. So President Bush, of course, said yes, and we raised $2 million. And the week before Christmas, we're going to Cameron, Louisiana, with a $2 million check so they can start building the emergency room. So we put together this lovely schedule. The high school band is marching, the governor's coming, there's speeches. It was lovely. He's looking at the schedule one day and he says, yeah, Jean, this is really boring. I said, this is a terrible schedule. And I was hurt. And I said, seriously. I said, a former president going to Cameron, Louisiana with $2 million is boring. That's not my definition of boring. And he said, these people have had a hard year. We need to do something really special for them. I have an idea. I'm like, he said, Barr and I have just fallen in love with this TV show. We watch it every night. It's called ER. And he said there's this young actor on it that we've never heard of, but he's really good. His name is George Clooney. And I'm thinking, why don't we ask George Clooney to go with us? He says, Jean, get it? ER, emergency room, it's perfect. Well, let me tell you the problem with this idea. They're watching ER in reruns on TNT. ER is no longer on television. And George Clooney is making all those ocean movies. He's People Magazine's Sexiest Man Alive. And I said, sir, ER is not on TV anymore. And he sort of looked at me like, we watch it every night. And, you know, he truly is was one of the smartest people I knew that any of you will know. But I challenge any of you to explain the concept of reruns to the former President of the United States. And so then I said, sir, here's the deal. We don't know George Clooney. He's not in my Rolodex. I said, I think his politics are a little to the left of yours, and I know this isn't political, but I just don't think George Clooney, the week before Christmas, is going to go with you to Cameron, Louisiana, because you're watching 10-year-old TV shows on TNT. So this is why working for George Bush was so much fun. We're ready. I'm looking at a You know, the man almost always got his way. George Clooney came. And I love showing this photo because it just says so much about George Bush. This is the difference between him and me. I got the high school marching band to come. He got George Clooney. And you're going to have to read the book to read the whole story, but many of you know who Jerry Weintraub is, who has a house here in Maine and had a house here in Maine. He's departed this good earth. Jerry Weintraub was the producer of all those ocean movies. So President Bush Googled George Clooney, I guess looking for a phone number, when I said, I don't have his phone number. And he came into my office and he said, you didn't tell me that Jerry Weintraub produced the ocean movies. He called Jerry Weintraub, who called George Clooney, who came. And I love showing that picture because I can't see you women, but I know you all just about passed out. He's pretty, he just is. Anyway, that's the last story. Usually at my book events, I go on and tell you a lot more stories. I'm not gonna tell you any more stories. And I will tell you why. Because I'm here in Maine, I decided to do something a little different tonight. And I'm asking 4 people to join me on stage. And while they're coming up here, President Bush had three of his personal aides grow up here in Maine. And I'm going to let them introduce themselves. Okay, guys. Oh my gosh, it's just like the olden days. Come on up. Three of these guys grew up here, and I'm going to let them tell you. They all started out, not Giancarlo on the end. Giancarlo married into Maine. He married a reporter from Channel 6? No,
Channel 13.
Channel 13. He was at an event supposed to be working, and he's flirting with the TV reporter. But Giancarlo married Amanda Bergen, and they now own a house in Kennebunkport. All three of these young men are planning to move back up here. So I thought it'd be fun for this Maine audience to hear some of their stories. I will tell you that in the green room, trying to get these four to listen to me, to pay attention to me, to quit talking, this could be the most boneheaded idea I ever had. So we will now see how this goes. Can I come over? Are you ready?
Come on.
Okay.
Ready.
All right.
Water's warm.
I do want to say, on the way up here, Coleman was saying to me, Jean has such great stories. She should write a book. So you're onto something.
Yes.
So I'm going to let them introduce themselves, but here I have one opening question for each of them, and just shout out your answer. How many times did I fire you while you were President Bush's personal aide?
Including 5 minutes ago?
Yes, yeah. How many
Multiple.
times did Barbara Bush fire you?
Multiple.
Multiple. You
I
think
might carry that record. I think I'm somewhere near the 50s, so
I think we fired you 46
it
times.
was an accounting glitch.
Yeah. Were you ever fired?
I don't think I was ever fired.
Yeah,
I never knew it.
You were. No, they're four amazing young men. You're not that young anymore, I guess. But three of them grew up here, as I said. So we're going to start with Giancarlo. We're going in the order that they served, and they'll tell you who they are, and they're going to tell you, we had a huge argument in the green room. They're going to tell you one story, their favorite story, one of their stories from when they were President Bush's personal aide, and then we have time left over. We maybe can tell two stories. But Giancarlo, you're on.
Good evening, everyone. My name is Giancarlo Perisutti. I was President Bush's aide from 1996 to 2000, and I guess I'm the dean of the Corps of personal aides this evening, although I did have a predecessor who unfortunately isn't here. But it's great to be here, and I'm thrilled to talk about one of my favorite topics of all time, the man that I used to work for. I'll start with a quick story that many, if not most of you know, because President Bush used to retell it all the time, usually before he gave a speech. And he would talk about how when he was in politics, his adversaries often used to chide him and try to demean him as a man of privilege. And President Bush was always quick to say that they didn't mean it as a compliment. They meant that he was this rich guy who was out of touch and you shouldn't elect him. And President Bush would always follow it up by saying, but you know, they only got it half right. And yes, I came from a wealthy family, but where I was really privileged was in the values that my parents instilled in me, which formed the person that I was and molded the character that I have. And for the 4 years that I worked for him, every single day I got a front row seat to that character, to that integrity, and to the man that he became. And this is a quick story about that. In 1998, Pepsi-Cola celebrated its 100th anniversary. And this was back in the day when corporations were unburdened by the rules and the culture of today, so they could take the gloves off and have a big old bender and spare no expense on lavish parties, which is exactly what Pepsi did. They rented out this massive resort on the island of Kona, Hawaii. They hired President Bush and Margaret Thatcher to be the speakers for the assembled VIPs and customers and obviously executives of the corporation. And the entertainment was Lord of the Dance, which you remember back to the 90s was the Irish dancers, it was a big thing. And they hired a small rock and roll band from the UK called the Rolling Stones to play at this event. they tented over the parking lot of the resort, and that's where the Stones were going to play. So the evening that the Rolling Stones are playing, President and Mrs. Bush, who was with him on the trip, have dinner with the VIPs, the PepsiCo C-suite, and their other assembled important people, all the way at one end of the resort. And we had this, President Bush called it the golfcade. So it was a parade of golf carts that the Secret Service agents and the hotel staff and the VIPs and the Bushes, everyone took to move around. So I went to meet them at the end of the evening after the dinner to walk them back to their room to finish the night. And President and Mrs. Bush come out and they say, you know what, we think we're gonna walk. It's such a beautiful night here on the island of Hawaii. We don't need to get in the golfcade. We're just gonna walk across the resort to our room. Okay, great. So we start walking. And as we're walking kind of up on this bluff, the stage is below and the Stones are starting to play. And of course I'm excited, like, let's move this along. I want to get back and get to it. And I'm walking behind President and Mrs. Bush, and President Bush turns to me and says, well, Giancarlo, the Rolling Stones are playing tonight. I said, yeah, I know. And he said, you should go listen to them. I said, well, I'm going to. And he said, well, but they're playing right now. Like, you should go now and go down and hear the concert. And I said, well, sir, thank you. No, I will, but I'd like to walk you and Mrs. Bush back. I'd like to debrief from today. We got to get your speech ready for tomorrow. I still have more work to do. He said, that's crazy. Just go down now. Don't worry. We'll do all that in the morning. And I'm saying to myself, well, I kind of want to do my job here and do it appropriately. And at this point, everyone in the parade of dignitaries, so to speak, is like stopped because President Bush has stopped and he's talking to me. And I'm starting to get a little embarrassed here, trying to figure a way out of this thing. And so I'm saying, well, sir, and he said, just go, don't worry about it. And I figured I had one more card to play. And I said, well, sir, I've got my jacket and my tie and my bag, and I just kind of want to get rid of all that stuff. And he says, well, why don't you just give it to me? And I said, looked at him like he was crazy. And as I was about to protest one last time, Mrs. Bush, who was right behind me, comes in with a dearie. Now, those of you who knew Mrs. Bush knew that any time you were on the receiving end of a dearie, there was a zinger that was about to follow. So I just kind of held my breath and looked at her, and she said, dearie, George told you to do something. I highly instruct that you do it. So at that point, I had run out of all options. And in front of all of these people, I essentially start undressing. I take off my jacket, I take off my tie, I take off my bag. President Bush opens his arms, takes all of it, and tells me to go down and watch the concert. So as I walk down the hill to go to the tent, I look back. And, forever, what I will remember about that evening was not being 5 feet away from Ronnie Wood and Mick Jagger and Keith Richards and Charlie Watts, but it will be the image of the 41st President of the United States carrying all my stuff back to his room just so I could go down and have an evening and watch the concert, which he wanted me to do. And that was the kind of person that George Bush was, and Gene, that was the man that I knew.
Can I tell one story? Your first day on the job, President Bush says to Giancarlo, is a very proud second-generation Italian-American. First. His parents, you're first-generation Italian-American, Giancarlo Peressuti. And President Bush says to him, I'm a very busy person. I do not have time to say your entire name. Henceforth, you will be known as Carlos. So in one fell swoop, he went from Italian-American to Mexican. It was fascinating.
Never look back.
And he called you Carlos always.
He did.
He was too, but Giancarlo was just too long of a name. Okay, Mr. Frechette.
So thank you for having us. Giancarlo is the only one that wasn't also a summer lad.
Yes.
Very impressive title. I grew up in Sanford, so local boy, and I was able to get a job in working for the Bushes in the summer, and it incorporated everything. It could be, run errands, help Mrs. Bush with things around the property, help at the house, or run around and pick great people up at the airport. I always joked it was like future Vice President Dick Cheney or Condoleezza Rice or Terry Hatcher. So if you're a 16-year-old kid driving out there, you're like, this is the greatest thing in the world, right? So that's sort of how I started it. But I was going to talk about the relationship of the Odd Couple. You sort of hit on it, so
You got to tell the funeral story.
So, like you said, they had a relationship, but not a working relationship prior to 2004, right? Sort of the library. I mean, we had to go through White House switchboard to get them. But after the horrible events, the tsunami in Christmas of 2004, President Bush 43 had invited or had asked President Clinton and President Bush to join forces and to travel to the region to help raise awareness and to also raise funds, more importantly, to help with the disaster. They both very quickly agreed to do it. And this is, one president had lost, unfortunately, in a bitter race. Yet they both stepped up to do it, and they traveled there. And the reception they got was quite impressive. We would go to countries where leaders would say, what you two are doing here, we could not do in our own country. So it just really it had a profound impact on bringing these two separate parties together for common good. So they did such a great job that they were asked to do it again, sadly, for Hurricane Katrina and Rita, and subsequently.
But you forgot
Ike.
Yeah.
And so
There's a couple others.
they just kept going. It was really very good. They raised hundreds of millions of dollars. But what was interesting is these two presidents were often found themselves traveling on, essentially Air Force Two. Two presidents, one bedroom. So they would get on board, and President Bush wasn't sure what would happen, so he brought a roll-out mattress to put down on the airplane. But President Clinton, with great deference, said, "No, you'll take the bedroom," which President Bush was very happy about. But he also took time to roll out his mattress for him. But Gene Becker and I were traveling all over the world with them at the time. We quickly found out why President Clinton didn't need the bedroom, and that's because he didn't sleep the entire time. We would sit together on the conference tables, and it would just be, oh hell, the card game.
He taught us the game, oh hell. This is what Tommy and I did for our country.
Hours.
We spent hours playing oh hell with Bill Clinton. It was exhausting.
It was quite an interesting tip, but part of this relationship in between this in 2005, His Holiness Pope John Paul II had passed. And the President of the United States at the time had asked his dad, will you please come and join me? I'd like to have President Clinton come as well. Of course, they did it. And the flight just happened to sort of arrive late at night in Rome.
Wait, can I set it up?
Yes, you can.
This is not stealing from your time.
No. I should say this before you jump in. We asked Gene, all four of us got together, and we asked Gene, what exactly should we talk about? And she came back with the classic.
This was 20 minutes ago. They said, what are we supposed to do?
She came back with the classic line, I'd say about 3 minutes. So I've already crossed over. Anyway,
so let me just set this up quickly. So it's the beginning part of their friendship, but they were becoming friends. And the Pope dies, and the president wanted to take all the former presidents. And President Clinton's chief of staff, a woman named Laura Graham, called me. He had just had open heart surgery. And Laura said, he cannot go to Rome. He cannot. His doctor says he may not go. And I started thinking, okay, why are you calling me? And she said, well, he just said to me, I'm going to call and see what President Bush thinks. I'm going to get his opinion on whether he thinks I should go to Rome. And Laura says, please, he has got to tell him he can't go. I got this. So I run to President Bush's office. I tell him what's going on. He says, I got it. And sure enough, the receptionist buzzes and says, President Clinton's on line 1. And President Bush gets on the phone, and I can only hear his end of the conversation. But he says, well, Bill, I think you can go to Rome. He said, it's Air Force One has that great medical unit, and there's doctors and nurses. He says, I would sort of like you to go because George is going to have bilateral meetings, and you and I can just hang out and have fun. And I'm going, no. And he's like waving me off. And then he hangs up. He says, great news, Bill's going to Rome. And my next call was from Laura Graham, who said, what the hell just happened? He went to Rome. He didn't die. He's still alive. So, you know.
He made it. He did
so,
make
okay,
it.
back to.
So they land in Rome. It's late at night, and if anyone here has not been in a presidential motorcade, particularly when you have multiple presidents, they're like 50 to 70 the cars. They're just massive, and so all the presidents decide to get into the Beast, the President of the United States limo, and so they drive to the Vatican, and they only let the very secure packages, just a tight areas to move all the motorcades. The entire world's coming, all these heads of state. And so they go in and pay the last respects for His Holiness. And on their way out, the president is staying at the U.S. ambassador's residence. And the two former presidents are staying at a local hotel. So as the president's getting in his car to leave, he sort of half-jokingly says, "You're all right for a ride, right, Dad?" And he said, "Oh, yes, President Clinton's right there. Yes, of course, we all have motorcades and whatever." So they wave goodbye, and the motorcade goes. What no one knew is the two former presidents' motorcades were outside the Vatican walls, which were, a quarter of a mile away. And so it's two presidents, two aides, one for each of the presidents, and then two Secret Service agents, one for each. And so the poor Secret Service are just...
1 o'clock in the morning.
Oh, yeah, 1:30 in the morning, they're like, "Where are the cars?" And just these jostling around, sort of how we're going to get these cars in here. And so President Bush and President Clinton, of course, just to great credit, just say, "Well, there's no problem. We'll just walk down to the gates. It's not too far." There are delegations lined up that are sort of coming in line. And this is, let me remind you, sort of a time of great rhetoric from the United States to specific nations. And the second delegation we get to is Iran. And as the two presidents are walking by, 10 guys come rushing out, and there's these two agents that are trying to stand up front, but they just wanted photos. And so here President Bush and President Clinton are taking photos with the entire delegation from Iran. But they were just regular guys. We're just gonna go down here and get to the motorcade. But it really, that and so many other trips, it formed this bond and this relationship. And people always ask, is it real? I know you always hear that all the time. And they met privately every summer for the rest of President Bush's life. And there was no agenda. It was come over, spend the night, we'll golf, we'll go boating. I don't think President Clinton liked the boating as much, but they would, it was just, how are you doing? How's your family? And it really was it was two friends coming together. So it's quite the impressive
Somebody once gave President Bush a hard time about the friendship and said, "Why are you friends with Bill Clinton?" And President Bush's answer, and President Clinton knew this and he loved it. President Bush said, "Look, I'm 90, whatever the age he was at the time. I ran out of things to say 5 years ago. When I'm with Bill Clinton, I don't have to worry about that."
Yeah, he did love that.
If you go back to that photo that I showed you backstage from Hurricane Harvey, and it was all the former presidents, if you look at that photo, I wish maybe the guys are going to kill me if we can put that back up on the screen, the photo of all the former presidents. Look who's talking. Just to prove my point, look who's talking. Anyway, thanks, Tom. Okay, Mr. Appleby.
My turn, okay. Well, I'll follow Tom. I'm also a local boy. Grew up in Kennebunk, right up the road. And I also started chauffeuring and cleaning pools and working out in the yard, which was absolutely fantastic. It actually gave me the opportunity to meet and know the family in a really close and intimate way as the Bushes were wont to do with all the folks that worked for them. So as I read through Gene's book, one of the things that stood out for me actually closer to the end was the point about him being a jokester. And I think for me, that was one of the things that I loved seeing everywhere we went, everything we did. He was always, he was a practical jokester, and I think you make a really good point that people didn't really know that, right? I mean, I think the family did. And so the story that sprang to mind for me was in 2008, we had the opportunity to go to the Beijing Olympics, which of course was a once-in-a-lifetime opportunity for somebody like me, and of course, we flew over, and we flew over a few days ahead. He was the honorary captain of the U.S. team, and so we got to go see these amazing events. We got to go see Michael Phelps win gold, and we got to go, to the opening ceremonies. Tom, you were with us, but because we got there ahead of time, we were all staying at the same hotel as the president. So the president, sitting president of the United States, 43, was coming as well. And he was bringing several members of the family, including Barbara and Jenna. And so we were at the hotel the day that they were arriving. They were getting in late, and we had some downtime. And so he went back to his room, I went back to my room, and just relaxed a little bit. And I came out, and the agents would stand outside whatever room he was in, of course, right? And so I came back out, and he was staying down at the corner room, and but the agents weren't there anymore. And we didn't have anything on the schedule, so I didn't think he was going to go anywhere. And so I went around the corner, and the agents were standing outside another room. And so I went down. I said, "What's going on? What's going on?" Said, well, I don't know. We went in here. And so I look inside the room, and the former president of the United States has gotten the sitting ambassador to the People's Republic of China to come in, and I see bedclothes all over the floor. And the two of them were in the middle of short sheeting Barbara and Jenna's beds before they arrived that night in the 50-car motorcade. And I see the family laughing because I don't think this was the first time that little prank had been pulled on various members of the family. It was such an incredible moment that amongst all of these amazing events at the Olympics, what I see is him pulling in and pulling a prank on a family member. And I don't know, I can't recall what Barbara and Jenna said or did that night when they got there and couldn't actually go to bed. But I do remember the look on his face, on 41's face, as he walked back out of that room, very self-satisfied with himself, that he had pulled another one over on a member of the family. So anyway, it was fun.
Coleman LaPointe, so I too am a summer lad. I started in '04, so at a very young age. And fortunately for me, nepotism was alive and well at the time. So Tom Frechette is actually my first cousin as well, if you did not know that. So he was the personal aide when I first came on board. So any instructions to drive or do anything either came from Mrs. Bush, 41, or Tom Frechette. So I started as the aide after gym, and I did put notes down to stay on time to actually
Coleman,
make sure I
you
can
were
get through
always
it.
my favorite aide.
Tried to.
You're organized, you listened
I did listen and
I was going to tell the Taylor Swift story, and now I'm not.
So the story I wanted to tell tonight is the story about little Patrick.
Oh.
So it's a compassionate story. It was a standard summer morning. We were up at the main house, and President Bush was avoiding going to the gym at all cost. He did a morning workout routine every morning. And
with Heath Pierce, who's here.
With Heath Pierce, yes.
The great Heath Pierce.
And it wasn't you, Heath.
He's out here there somewhere.
And so that morning, one of the agents had showed up, and he had no hair. And a number of the agents would come through, and you'd see them through the bedroom window on their bikes. And President Bush wanted to know why these agents were showing up bald. And so we walked down to the gym that morning, and one of the agents that was with us started giving a briefing that one of the Secret Service agents' son, who was 2.5 years old at the time, had been diagnosed with leukemia, and that he had shaved his head during the treatment because he was losing his hair. And so naturally, President Bush's first reaction was, I am certainly going to be shaving my hair as well. It hit home to him since he and Mrs. Bush had lost their daughter, Robin, around the same age to leukemia. So I suggested maybe we inform Mrs. Bush, similar to the 75th year jump. And so he glanced right back at me with a smirking face and very informatively said, "She'll likely find out when I'm back for lunch." He was right. So, in a very selfless act, 41, we finished the gym, went to the office, and he let a few of us actually take swipes at his hair.
until nothing was left. And at the end of it, I think over 20 Secret Service agents, myself, the summer lads that were there at the time, all had shaved our hair in solidarity with Patrick. And the family ended up inviting Patrick over later that week, who again, 2.5, was just excited to be anywhere. But we took a group photo with all the Secret Service agents. I think for the first time, for him, it felt normal to be around that many people, also without hair. And it was a very selfless act of President Bush. And I think what I'd share here is what I admired most about President Bush in general was his humility. So it was a very selfless act. And so the event ended up raising, a ton of money for Patrick and his family. Patrick's now 10 years old and healthy today.
He's healthy. I just had lunch with him and his parents. He's cancer-free.
So thank you for letting me share, Jean.
So Coleman, I'm not sure why, but I think until the day she died, Barbara Bush blamed me for her husband going bald. And the first I knew of it is when you were buzzing, giving him a buzz cut. I came downstairs in the office and I said, "What are you doing?" And Mrs. Bush told me I should have stopped it. And I said, by the time I got there, it was too late. It was a great photo. Yeah. The photo's in the book. This is another ploy to make you buy the book. It's a great photo of a bald George Bush with a bald little Patrick. So, what?
I was going to add I didn't do a humor. Is it too late? I know you had a humor
it's
too.
Too late. Story. I asked, we don't have a hard, if anybody has dinner reservations at 6:30, you're in trouble. So you go ahead.
Humor story, sure. I mean, can't remember if it was Coleman or Jimmy that talked about, well, obviously Jimmy, because your story proved it, but President Bush's sense of humor, I mean, he probably was the funniest person, or I should say the person that loved to laugh more than anyone I had ever met. And that definitely didn't, I remember before I knew him, when I knew of him when he was my president, that certainly never came across. And I think the two comments that people would make the most often when they met him was, wow, you're so much taller than I thought you'd be, or you're so much funnier than I thought you would be. Yes. I'm not sure he liked either one of those, but in any event, humor was such an integral part of the 4 years that I spent with President Bush. And one story will always jump out in my mind. It was one of those trips, I was on a trip with him where we had no margin of error when it came to time. And those of you who knew President Bush knew that he was habitually punctual and was insistent on not being late, and rightly so. And so a big part of the aide job, as these guys will tell you, is making sure that you stay on time. I think our first stop on this trip was a speech in Greensboro, North Carolina. And President Bush finishes the speech, and he's at the front of the stage kind of shaking hands with folks, and he's leaning over. And as he comes up, I see him kind of make this sort of awkward body movement that I'm sure no one else noticed, but I noticed it. And I thought, that was weird. I wonder if he threw his back out or anyway. So we get into the limo. Mrs. Bush was with us on this trip as well. So they were in the limo, and I was in the follow-up with the Secret Service. And all of a sudden, I hear the chatter on the radio, and the Secret Service are saying, we need to find a store, a men's clothing store, before we get back on the plane. And I'm looking at my watch, I'm like, we don't have any time to go shopping, and I'm gonna catch it if we're late for the next event, so what the hell is going on? So finally, I gather from the radio chatter that we're gonna stop at a Walmart, which is en route to the airport. President Bush had a private plane, so it was kind of near the FBO where we were flying out of. It's like a Tuesday at 11 in the morning, and we pull in to the parking lot of a Walmart in Greensboro, North Carolina, and I have absolutely no idea what's going on. So we get out of the limo, I get out of the limo, clearly, or out of the follow-up car, I have a bewildered look on my face, and President Bush looks at me and goes, "Carlo, you're probably wondering why we're stopped at Walmart." And I said, "Yes, sir, I am." He said, "Well, when I went to bend over to shake that woman's hand, the waistband on my boxers broke, and they're now down around my ankles." I was like, okay. So very triumphantly, in a way that only President Bush could, we all march into the Walmart in Greensboro at 11 o'clock on a Tuesday. President Bush finds the first orange-vested person that he can lay eyes on. It said, I need, in a loud voice, I need to know where the men's underwear section is. And this poor woman looked like she had just been, shot out of a cannon. And I mean, you could have heard a pin drop in that Walmart. So of course he is, he's picking up packages of boxers. Bar, what do you think of these? And everyone in the store is like, is this really happening? And he was in his element because obviously he knew he had an audience, and he made the most of it, made everyone laugh, and we were late for the rest of the day.
Go ahead.
Oh, I was gonna say I would just jump on
Wait,
that.
I have an underwear story.
Oh gosh, okay,
And then
go
we'll go
ahead.
back to you.
It's
And
degenerating here, isn't it?
So quick underwear story. It's 2000, Republican convention in Philadelphia. President Bush and John Carlo and I are in the office just getting as much work done as possible until we go to Philly. John Carlo and I are on a 7 a.m. flight Sunday morning. And about 5 o'clock that Saturday afternoon, I said to President Bush, sir, I've got to go home. I said, I got to do laundry. And just to underscore how serious the situation was, I, for some reason, said to him, seriously, if I don't go home and do laundry, I will have no clean underwear for the convention. And he says, well, yeah, get out of here. So I left, I went and got laundry detergent, I go home, I have 10 messages on my home machine from convention folks, including a woman named Leslie Goodman, who was in charge of the media for the Bush, the surrogates. And I called her back, I got my laundry started first, then I called her back, and Leslie said, yeah, I just called the office looking for you, and President Bush answered the phone, I recognized his voice, and I asked to speak with you, and he said, I am so sorry, Jean left, apparently she has no clean underwear. So, the man was honest to a fault. So I said to Leslie, let me call you back. And I called the office to say, please do not tell people. Anyway, he had left the office, so I just had to insert the underwear story.
Fair
Okay,
enough.
what are you gonna say?
Mine, it's not exponentially further away from that, but I was 3 weeks on the job, and we would come back from trips, and President Bush, it was a Saturday, but our Saturdays were a lot of times busy with a lot of people there, and so between Secret Service staff and other people, and so he calls me down, Tommy, come down here. So I'm, every time he calls, I'm still, my heart jumps, I'm going down, I have my notepad, I have my pen. And I'm thinking we're going to go over thank you notes, which you're always obsessed with, or we're going to talk about the upcoming schedule. So I come into his office, and I sit down in the chair across from his desk, and what I am unaware of is that he had just recently received an electronic version of a whoopee cushion. And it was under my seat. And so I come down, yes, sir, very important here. And all of a sudden the sound goes off, and my face is beet red, and just looking down like, gosh, no, where's this coming from, And it happens again, and finally there was a grand finale on this thing, and about 2 or 3 Secret Service agents, and maybe you and some others come running in, and so that was my introduction to this is going to be a wild ride. So, worked out.
Which one of you wants to talk about the potato gun he bought and shot off potato cannon and shot off potatoes at the tourists across the coast?
We all had
You
had
all
fun
love
with
that, but you all.
Oh, yeah.
Coleman, why don't you tell us about the potato cannon?
Oh
It was
my
the
gosh.
dumbest thing ever.
It was amazing. I think GE designed it. It was a GE. It was like 1996. There's a plaque on this cannon. It was so big. And I'm pretty sure every summer lad probably took it home with them at one point in time, secretly. Actually, one of my favorite stories of this, he had been pointing it, and I think Gigi was there, a bunch of the grandkids, and he was aiming the potato cannon at Fidelity. It was in the Cove. And I'd seen them across the way. I was in the green truck coming back from probably the hardware store, and I'm all jazzed up. I just practiced it a week earlier without telling anybody, and I came running over. And I think you were the ATOM, and I get there, I'm very excited, so he's like, okay, go ahead, step forward, Coleman, show us how this thing works. And I go to put a potato in, and it doesn't quite seal the end of it. So I get there, I'm ready to go, I'm jazzed up, and just nothing happens. It It was awful.
Didn't it run
it was
on
quite embarrassing.
hairspray? Didn't you spray
Yeah, you had to
like?
spray the inside with hairspray, get it all prepped, and
I never got the
and go.
potato cannon.
His life was about fun. If you could have everything. I mean, I'm sure Doro's here. I'm sure from a little kid, it was always about how do you make every situation fun. And he did such a good job at it.
So let me just say, because we're out of time, and I do want to end with some words from President and Mrs. Bush. I cannot tell you how much President Bush loved his personal aides. If we could put the picture back up on the screen, that last one of all of them, all his personal aides over the years. I think, is Tim McBride actually here?
He is, yeah.
Oh my God, there's another aide who I didn't know was coming tonight until a little while ago.
You know why that's dangerous too? Because he was always Mr. Perfect, and
I know.
Barbara Bush would always say, "Well, Tim would
McBride would never
Tim McBride would never do that.
Tim would have done it this way."
This picture was taken at the Capitol. The aides, we put together a special group for all of his personal aides to pay their respects when he was lying in state in the rotunda. President Bush loved these boys. Tim McBride, I'm even going to call you a boy in this context. They became like his family, and he was so proud of you guys. You all were rock stars. You really were, and I think you know how much he loved you. You too, Tim. You were Mr. Perfect. There's so many great stories. You all may have to write a book, but
So,
on that
real
note,
quick, I just want to say something about Gene Becker, because
is it nice?
It's not. Okay. But one thing that's not in your job description is sort of corralling 20-year-old boys. And so
The
We all have
potato
stories about that.
often
Oh my
we
God.
would come back from trips and you'd be like, "Oh my goodness, I can't believe what I did," or issues across the board. And my mom's here. I think all our moms here.
Oh,
Your
yeah,
mom's
but
probably-
your parents are here.
What do you mean? Gene certainly stepped in when needed for either a hug or maybe a slap in the back of the head.
You
So
did
she was
what?
a
Yeah.
pseudo mom for us while we were on the road. So obviously we love you. So many
Sure.
thanks.
Yes, we do.
Thanks
Oh
for
my
having
gosh,
us.
that's sweet.
Thanks.
Okay, thank you.
That was-
Nope, stay there. Stay there. We're a little over time, but because it's the George and Barbara Bush lecture, it seemed appropriate to me, all these great stories about them, but I thought it would be nice to end the lecture hearing from them. And so this book was put together right after Mrs. Bush died, called Pearls of Wisdom. We put her name on this book because it's her words of wisdom. It's all the advice. I mean, there's so many people here who got a lot of advice from Barbara Bush over the years. But when I put this book together, what really struck me is I put some of her commencement speeches in here. And there was something going on in the world in 1991 that obviously really bothered her. There was something going on in this country. And I'm going to read this. This was written for college-age students. So for all the UNE students here, this is really for you. We need your help to right this ship. This is what Barbara Bush said to students in 1991, and it just resonates today. And it wouldn't kill the rest of us to listen to this either. So just briefly, this is a 1991 commencement speech. I would like for you to think about your relationships in a broader sense, the way you feel about and interact with people beyond your loved ones. I'm talking about the great need for better tolerance in our society. To be different, that is what life in America is about, after all. It can be difficult to be different in our society. It is too easy to be intolerant. Tolerance is much more than just representing people of a different race. It is a constant stream of little acts in our daily lives, big and small choices we face every day in the way we think about and talk about and deal with other human beings. It is about respecting people who have a physical or mental handicap, people who grew up different from the way you did, people who speak a different language or practice a different religion, people who are fatter or thinner or older or younger. We can be better. You can help us be better. God, we need her voice right now. You're going to swear she wrote this yesterday. I just have to add this PS. In another commencement speech, she wrote, political extremists roam the land, this is 1991, setting citizens against one another on the basis of their class or race. Such bullying is outrageous and not worthy of a great nation grounded in the values of tolerance and respect. We must conquer the temptation to assigning bad motives to people who disagree with us. You can lead the way. Share your thoughts and experiences, your hopes and frustrations, defend others' right to speak. If harmony is our goal, let's pursue harmony. Again, we need her voice more than ever. So President Bush was also very good in the advice department. And there's a whole chapter in The Man I Knew. I think we have a great picture of the Bushes I meant to ask you to put up during this part. This was taken on their 70th wedding anniversary. President Bush was once asked to give advice to young people. And once again, I think people of all ages can learn from this. There's a whole chapter in the book called Life Lessons, and this is the end of the chapter. These are 10 pieces of advice that he wanted to give young people everywhere. But every time I read it, I think, yeah, I don't do those 5, 6, or 7. Anyway, we can all learn. Number 1, don't get down when your life takes a bad turn. Out of adversity often comes challenge and success. Number 2, don't blame others for your setbacks. Number 3, when things go well, always give credit to others. Number 4, don't talk all the time. Listen to your friends and mentors and learn from them. Number 5, don't brag about yourself. Let others point out your virtues and your strong points. Number 6, give someone else a hand. When a friend is hurting, show that friend that you care. Number 7, nobody likes an overbearing big shot. Number 8, as you succeed, be kind to people. Thank those who help you along the way. Number 9, don't be afraid to shed a tear when your heart is broken because a friend is hurting. If you know and love the Bush family, you know they cry a lot. Doro's probably crying right now. But I love that they cry and show their emotions. And number 10, say your prayers. How much do we miss these two people? So thank you so much. That's the end. Thank you for coming. It's greatly appreciated. I will tell you that I am not signing books tonight, but the great Louise Hurlbut. Is Louise here? Yes. She is having a book signing at her store, Hurlbut Design, Saturday morning at 11 a.m. There will be books there available to buy. I will bring your own book, go buy a book. I thank you, Louise, for doing this. Her store is at, I think if I remember this right, 15 Western Avenue in Kennebunk. Is that right? 51. What is it? 51. Thank you. I'm old. I didn't hear that. 51. See, young people, you need them. 51 Western Avenue. And she maybe wouldn't want me to tell you this, but it's possible there's going to be mimosas and tea sandwiches. So, but you cannot have a mimosa or a tea sandwich unless you buy a book. Okay, all right, thank you so much, thank you.
Thank you very much.
Thank you, thank you.
Jean, thank you so much. That was absolutely wonderful. Such a personal inside glimpse into the President and First Lady's life. Thank you, and thank you to all the summer lads. And thank you to the Bush family for their support of this series and for their support of UNE over the years. And I have to share one little last thought to the relationship between the Bush family and the legacy of the President and First Lady and UNE not only is it strong historically, but it continues to be strong. My executive assistant, who basically runs my life, Holly, her son, Jake, was a summer lad on Walker's Point this summer. So the tradition continues. So thank you all, and thank you all for coming so much, and safe travels home.